Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial we're going to be creating some watercolor feathers using watercolor brush pens and just adding in a little bit of detail using some gel pens as well. So this can be used for stationery, for wall art. They're really fun to make. So I'm going to share my tips for creating watercolor feathers. So these are just a few that I've made, and what we're going to be using is Canson watercolor paper. All the materials shown in this video are available right in the video description, so just hit the link there and you can have access to everything used in this video. So the watercolor brushes that I'm using for this one are these Crafty Croc watercolor brushes. They also come with 2 water brushes, which are really nice. So you've got everything you need right in here, and there's quite a few colors, 24 colors in here. I'm also using Jelly Roll gel pens, so I'm using white ones for some extra detail. I've got a metallic gold, and then these ones are Stardust ones. These ones are basically colored glitter, so they're pretty cool, especially when you put them on top of watercolor. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. And then I'm using some hard pencils just so when we lay everything out, everything is nice and light, so when you paint over it you won't see the pencil marks. So this is my favorite set of drawing pencils, and I typically would use a 3H or a 4H, but I'm going to use an HB for this video just so it's a little darker and you can see it really well on screen. So I'm going to grab my HB out of here, and then I just have a stick eraser right here so I can erase away any unneeded lines really easily. So that's my favorite eraser. Okay, so I'm going to set everything aside for right now. We're going to draw out our feather shape and then we'll paint it in. So in order to create these feathers, what you want to do is have a pointed oval shape. So I'm going to draw a line down this way, and then I usually flip it around so my hand moves in the same motion for the arc of the other side. And remember, this is an organic form, so it's totally fine if things aren't perfectly symmetrical. They're not supposed to be. So then I will take a line all the way down just to kind of separate and give myself a guide of how everything's going to flow. And then this will kind of be the end of the feather, kind of the stem of the feather right here. And then there's always a few feather bits that are kind of poking out down here. You can reference, if you just do a Google image search of feathers, you can see some good examples of how that looks down there. So I'm just roughly drawing that in. I looked at a lot of reference images before I started this kind of technique of doing it. So if you want a more realistic feather, by all means, reference those realistic feathers and then take it from there. So in order to create those gaps that you see in feathers, it's just that naturally occurring gap. All I do is draw in just randomly areas where I'm going to leave gaps. And I don't want it to be too symmetrical, so then I would do like a skinny one that's closer to this one, and then one down here. Don't go overboard with these, you only need a few of them. And then I just erase away the top part of where these close in. And then what I'll usually do is just go in and then lightly erase over my darkest areas in my lines. I'm going to keep these dark just so you can see it really well, but I'll make it so my pencil lines are super light, which is part of the reason why I use a harder pencil than the HB. It'll just make much lighter lines to begin with because you don't want these lines poking out after you put in your watercolor, but mine are going to show just so you can see how everything works. All right, so now that we've got our feather shape, I can set all this aside and we can break out our watercolors. So when you're choosing your colors, always choose colors that blend pretty well together, otherwise they'll get muddy. So I'm going to kind of do one that's similar to this, where it fades from like a light green into a purple, but you can see that it fades naturally, so the colors blend really well as you go along. If I put this purple next to a yellow, it's going to make brown and it's going to be really ugly, or this purple next to an orange. You can see I've got a red in between, so the blend is seamless right there. Okay, so I'm going to grab those colors. I'm going to grab this bright green right here, and then this kind of bluish, and then I'll grab my purple. Actually, I'm going to put another, I think I'm going to put another blue in between. So I've got a nice little gradient, and then I'm going to grab my water brush right here. It's already filled with water. I did that ahead of time. And then the last thing you want to grab is just a paper towel, something to wipe off any excess paint off of your brush tip. That way things don't get muddy as you work along as well. Okay, so what I do, I'm going to fade from the lightest color up here down to my purple down here. So with these watercolor brush pens, I'm just going to lightly brush in some color. I'm not being super precise here because I want the water to really give me some nice variation with the coloring on this. So it's just a light brush in different areas, and I want it to blend nice and seamlessly. So whatever color I start with, I want to pick up my next color within that color. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to grab my next color and just kind of brush in on top of some of these areas so my blend is nice and seamless. And I'm going to do the same thing with the next color I do. I want to make sure I get into those small areas, so I'm a little more careful there. All right, and then I've got my dark blue. So same thing as before, bring it into the preceding color just a little bit. All right, and then I should have enough paint on my brush to fill in these little areas of feather at the very bottom. So I'm not going to put color right there. I'm just going to use whatever color is left on my brush tip. All right, so now the fun part of grabbing your water brush, get a little bit of water on the tip to start with, and then you can just start rubbing basically with the tip, painting these areas in. You can see how pretty that is. If you need a little bit more water, give it a little squeeze and then get right back into it. You kind of want to do this all at one time. You don't want to do part of it and then come back later. It just doesn't look as good, I've found. So I'm making sure I get nice and close to my edges. And you want to make sure that these two colors blend nicely together. So make sure you take some time to make sure those blend well. And now that I've got this new color on my brush tip, I don't want to come and revisit the top because then it would ruin that nice fade that I've got going on. All right, and now before I get to the next color, I always wipe the color off of my tip just in case I have any of this bright green. I don't want it to mix into this dark blue, and then I'll come back in. You just want to make sure that you keep your colors separate enough where colors that aren't very similar don't mix together. Okay, so that is our feather. All right, so you can just finish right here if you'd like. If you want to add in some extra detail, I'm going to show you how I do that. So the first thing that I do is kind of give myself a guide. I use a thin white gel pen for this, so this is the 05, and I just give myself a marker. Usually I can't see my pencil line through here, so this white is really nice because I can usually get a nice line that comes through, and I use this as a guide for when I start drawing in my metallics just because they appear a lot clearer. So you probably can't see that white very well, but I can see it, so it's a nice guide. And then I've got my gold right here, and I just draw a line. I just follow that line all the way down. And I stop just before my feathers break up at the bottom, and then I outline my entire feather with the gold. Okay, so by outlining your feather, a nice little side effect of it is being able to kind of hide any edges that weren't super precise when you were painting them in. So that just makes it look a lot cleaner having that outline around it, but obviously you can do whatever you'd like right here. I've tried a bunch of different styles, and I tend to lean towards my outline ones a lot more. You can see these ones don't have an outline, but you can throw in other details that you'd like. So I've been kind of experimenting with all kinds of different blends and details in there. So the next thing that we're going to do is put in that colored glitter. So you can follow the colors, all of them with colored glitter. I like just changing it up a little bit. So I'm going to do some green and some purple, so it kind of alternates and gives it just a little punch. So I just roughly draw in so it kind of feels like a feather still. Just some areas with the colored glitter. That's all it takes, because once we put in our final detail, it'll cover up any hard lines that you're seeing right now that don't look super pretty. All right, so the nice thing about this is that it's just really sparkly in the sunlight. I just love how it looks, just that extra pop of sparkle. So the last thing that I do is I grab my 08. So this is a thicker tipped white Jelly Roll gel pen, and I'll draw in all the lines of the feather. You can see a really good example of that right here. So I've still got my glitter in there, and then the white kind of sits right on top of it so it doesn't look as harsh as it does right now with these strong lines. So I'll just come in and draw them all in. This will show up a lot better on your darker colors than your lighter colors. And these are organic lines, so don't feel like they have to be super straight. Okay, and then what I also like to do is just draw in some edges of the feathers with my gold, just to give some edge detail, just like that. And this works especially well in the lighter areas where you can't see the white as well as in the darker areas. So just kind of flicking my wrist to have that kind of fade into the rest of the feather. Okay, so that is how to create a colorful feather using watercolor brush pens, a couple of pencils, and a few gel pens. Once again, all of the supplies that were used in this video are linked right in the video description, so just click on that link and you'll have access to everything. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe and don't forget to head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com, for even more design and lettering tutorials and a bunch of freebies. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.